We're live, but we're not really live, but we're kind of live.
I mean, we're alive. We're just not live. Until right about now, hello everyone, and welcome back to Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the latest Overwatch League news, information, and esports analysis. I am your host, Emily Drunk, and tonight on episode 72, we'll be discussing the latest in Overwatch League news. I will, look at some of the Academy team reveals, which are brand new to Contenders China. We'll reflect on player performances from this past week, preview the stage playoffs, and so much more. But before we can get into the news and introduce you to my co-host, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who is hanging out with us live tonight on Twitch for our live show. And of course, thank all of our repeat listeners out there. So unfortunately, my soulmate is not here to celebrate what is arguably the biggest moment in Seoul Dynasty history, which we'll get into. But joining me tonight is our YouTube wizard himself, Spider. Spider, how's your week been, my friend?
It's been all right, man. The biggest week in Seoul history, apparently. You guys make one playoffs after they've expanded the format, 3 times now? You finally make it. But you made it solidly, so I'll give you that. And you guys overcame your nemesis to do it, but you're going to run like smack dab into possibly the NYXL. So we'll see how that plays out, which we'll definitely talk about later. But my week as a whole has been pretty good, just prepping some Baptiste stuff. I'm going to have like a kind of a quick overview video coming out tomorrow for him. Nothing major. I'm going to do like the more long form video for his comp release, kind of like how I did for Ash last time. And that seemed to work out well. And I actually enjoyed doing that a lot more. So keep an eye on our YouTube channel. Like I said, the quick thing's going to come tomorrow, just the quick ability overview, weeks straight, like weaknesses, strengths, stuff like that. So, but pretty hype week in Overwatch. I mean, we got the last week in stage 1 of season 2 is under wraps. It was the shortened stage. I did beat Ramses in fantasy this week by a total of like 8 points, which was amazing because he had been unbeaten to this point. So now I have to beat Edinar, which apparently you beat Edinar, right? Wasn't it you who beat him this week in fantasy? Or was it someone else? Because he lost 2 according to the leaderboard. So there is no one unbeaten in our host fantasy. I don't know about like your fantasy challenge. I haven't been keeping up on that one, but I was excited to see like I did beat Ramses, who was like also front runner. And it seems like every week, man, I have to play the person who scores the highest that week, and I either have to score the highest or lose. And spoiler alert, I've lost a few of them. But I've been keeping, like, honestly, like, I've been watching, not really watching. I've been listening to Al by the numbers because you guys give me all the inside tips because I can't keep track of it all. So I knew to go out and seek players for this shortened weekend, which was awesome because nobody picked up Simusu from the Titans. And I was like, how has nobody picked him up in that league yet? So I grabbed him, and man, he had like a monster day. So he might have single-handedly won it for me. But I'm gonna stop rambling because we got a lot to talk about. I mean, we're going into the first playoffs of 2019. So obviously there's been some questions, some drama, some signings. We've got no shorthand to talk about, and we're going to cover a Dallas match for our deep dive, much to my chagrin, but we're going to talk about it. So let's get moving.
Absolutely. So first up, this is bittersweet news for me specifically, just due to the fact that it means that I'm not getting something else. But Nate Nanzer sat down for a panel hosted by ESPN's Mina Keems at South by Southwest to discuss the Overwatch League. And Nate Nanzer confirmed that during the 2020 season, all of that is going to be played in the franchise's home cities. So teams will be playing more within their conferences rather than outside of them. And we do know that travel is going to be based on a regional basis to help ease with the jet lag portion of it. We also had Jacob Wolf reporting that the teams will be in charge of the venues, the ticket sales, the associated fees, with obviously the league taking care of all the responsibilities with broadcasting the games. Now, this is where the bittersweet part comes for me, and that was the fact that the Sports Business Journal's Ben Fisher reported that there are no plans of expanding before then, which pretty much closes the door on Chicago for an entirely another season. So I might not get a Chicago team until 2021, and I know Ed and I are probably going to rant for probably 2 hours on Wednesday about that specifically.
So the average show of Heroes Never Die.
I mean, for Ed, absolutely. But we do know, so obviously, we got 2020 featuring games played throughout 19 different cities, because obviously LA has 2 teams, and that's how that math tracks out. But just as a reminder, we do have our first taste of the road games this year, with Dallas Fuel, Atlanta Reign, and the LA Valiant serving as hosts in 2019. But it seems like as of right now, things are basically where we're needing them to be. We are hitting our early goals, so to speak, and it seems like right now it's just a matter of perfecting the travel issues, any of the jet lag, things like that, getting the production on point throughout all of this, and then beyond that, maybe we'll start to add some more teams into the rotation following season number 3 at that point.
Yeah, I mean it's good that we got confirmation on this, because there had always been like the rumblings, the hearsay, the Nanzer said behind closed doors that this is what we're shooting for. We always got like the rumor mill that this is what they really wanted. They wanted, this season to be the last season that is primarily hosted in LA. 2020 was the offshoot. So getting confirmation on that was great. Getting confirmation that we're not going to get any more teams, I agree with you, even outside of, I don't have any dog in the Chicago fight, but not getting any more teams is a little sad. But when you think about it, like between season 1 and season 2, the roster size of teams increased by 66%. That is insane. Like for growth for a new league of this caliber, and the amount of money that's being thrown around in this league. So no growth between 2 and 3 outside of just playing in their home arena is, I think, to be accepted. So I am glad that they are kind of doubling down and just confirming this stuff. If they could confirm things in the rule book a little sooner, that would be great. But, at least they're confirming some things. And I'll take what I can get at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I'm not that surprised that we're not seeing expansion, just due to the fact that adding travel into the situation is such a huge undertaking. And with that many teams, there's obviously a lot of logistics to that aspect of not just, setting up all the traveling, you got the hotels, all of that stuff added into that. So outside of that, I 100% agree with the rulebook things. We'll get more into that, because we were kind of left in the dark in regards to what some of the scheduling was going to be in this week, but we'll touch more on that here in just a little bit. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the Academy team announcements, as we do have 2 new Academy teams that have been added to the fold. So first up, we have Hangzhou Spark unveiling their Academy team, who will be competing under Bilibili Gaming in Contenders China. Now, this roster consists of Shai, Yakumo, Over, Zijin, Mika, Coldis, and Winter. So we have three of these players previously playing for Flag Gaming, who had placed in the top 4 in Season 2 of Contenders China this past year, and finished in second in the 3rd season of last year. We have Zijin and Yakumo, who both played for the Shanghai Dragons Academy team, that being Team CC. They'd been with that team since their inception. And then Winter is actually from the sister team of Flag Gaming. So they basically built this roster from 2 specific teams, or 2 gaming families, I should say, just due to the fact that, you had the main roster and then kind of like the secondary roster. Now, you have someone like Shai, who is probably most known for playing in the Overwatch World Cup. He was on the Chinese team in both 2017 and 2018. And this is going to mark Bilibili's first entrance into the Overwatch scene, but this is not like a new esports team, because in general, because they do operate, a League of Legends teams outside of that. But I am just really curious to see if they're just going to keep a lot of the pink just due to the Billy affiliation there.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, that it's basically like Chinese Crunchyroll. So there's a lot of power behind the brand and keeping the colors and keeping that all in line. Does nothing but help them. And they picked up a lot of good players. So when I was going over this roster, some of the names may not be known to most people, but these are all names that we've come across as we've paid attention to Korea contenders, Pacific contenders, stuff like that. And like you already mentioned my standout, which is Shy, because Shy, it seems like no matter what he plays, he is the standout. He used to play support. They transitioned him to DPS now, which means he'll probably play Brigitte. That's a joke that's not going to work tomorrow, man. So I had to get it in because tomorrow is the start of the 4 DPS meta officially with the new patch. But as a whole, like this team has a lot of deep playoff experience in contenders. So if they can get the teamwork side of it down, they have the talent side of it already there. So I am, I'm excited to see the Spark play, but I'm also excited to see how their academy team does. Does that mean I will watch Chinese contenders? Probably not. I mean, I'll probably catch a game or two, but there's so much now that it's like a wealth of Overwatch esports. Like you have to pick and choose. Like even you, the Overwatch esports guru and podcast master, finally threw in the towel and was like, I can't do another podcast. So now we have a 5th podcast on the network, and it's the first one you're not actually the host of. So that's how lucky we are right now to have so much Overwatch esports. But I will definitely be watching this team, like paying attention to them to see how they do. But I don't know how many live games I will catch.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those moments where I kind of had to take a step back and reflect, and it's just like, with that many regions now, including USA, the United North America, expand into 2 regions for contenders. At that point, it's just like, I was having a hard enough time with the 7. Now we got 8. What is going on? But what I will say is, unlike the next team that we're going to be talking about, this particular team does not have any 2-way contracted players. Unlike the Guangzhou Charge Academy team that was also announced, who have not 1, not 2, but 3 players on a 2-way contract. So there might be a little bit more incentive to see what is going on with the Guangzhou Academy. So the Academy team, much like their Overwatch League team, features a very mixed roster. You have a 7-man roster that has a 2-man coach and staff. We have 6 different nationalities on this roster. And for this roster, we have Nero and Mui on DPS. We have MG and Tizzy for the tank line. With the support line, they have 3 players. So they have Rise, Sentry, and Only Wish. Now, although 7 players are on a 2-way contract, well, that is Nero, Rise, and Only Wish. And we do have a lot of familiar names on this roster. We have MG, who unfortunately was on the Shanghai Dragons during the inaugural season. He was an off-tank player. So there is that. You also have a familiar face in Cuddles on the coaching staff, who was with the LA Valiant during Stage 1 of 2018. Not Stage 1 of, 2019. But, there was some movement there, too. And then you have Kant, who is also on this coaching staff, who had played for Maki Esports in the Contenders Pacific Season 1 of last year, and he was also on the Chinese Taipei World Cup team this past year. And this is going to mark his first venture into coaching. So it seems like time and time again, we see more pro players turn in to coaching gigs. And for the most part, things have been looking pretty good making that transition for other players out there. And I'm expecting more of the same. And I have to say, honestly, I'm not surprised to see the approach that Guangzhou Charge took. This is a team from top to bottom that is a very mixed roster. And honestly, out of all the expansion teams, Guangzhou has really been one of my favorite ones to watch. And knowing that they have 3 players that are contracted as being 2-way, I would not be surprised to see a little bit more movement from this team going from, tier 1 to tier 2, as opposed to some of the other teams out there.
For sure. I mean, when you look at like at least them compared to the Spark Academy team, Guangzhou went with the more like get a little bit of the homegrown talent and then sprinkle in whatever talent you could pick up that you think would actually work well in this team. And I think Tizzy is a great pickup because I feel like Tizzy is one of the great players that never really had a chance on London to shine, and I think he is a very talented player, at least going off of what we've seen in the past. So I feel like he deserves another shot because he did do well on what was it? He was on XL2, right? And he did well. So I'm excited to see him. Nero, I am very excited to see him, especially in the upcoming meta, because Nero was always one of the like top Genjis in the world. Like he was always in that conversation, like he can play Genji into almost anything and make it work. But he has shown more flexibility, so I feel like he's going to be another one to watch. And I agree as a whole. Like I think Guangzhou as an organization has kind of adopted that like, oh, we will pull talent wherever we think is the best place to pull talent from. And it has led to like an interesting team to watch. Like you get to see, Kib play on stage, which is, when you look at the rest of the roster, you're like, wait, why does he fit in there? And then he does really well in that roster. So this is a team that seems to have a good, like, management style, a good, backbone behind them to support this type of infrastructure that you need with multinationality teams. So I'm curious to see how this academy team will do. But they do have a lot of talent on them, so I feel like they're kind of up there with the Spark right now. It's just when you have all of one nationality, you innately have an instinct advantage that you don't have a language barrier. So I am worried about them getting through the language barrier. But if their Overwatch team has showed us anything, they are capable of doing that. So I look forward to seeing how this team does because they do have a lot of talent on it.
Absolutely. So next up, let's talk a little bit about merchandise, and we do have an update from Fanatics, who have been in charge of doing a lot of the jerseys. And we got an update in regards to what jerseys are selling the most. And to no surprise, we see a familiar face still locking down that top spot, that being none other than DeFran, who has basically just been leading the entire season since the jerseys came out. And then I know they did like a top 7, so we have Jonak coming in second, Surefour in third, Gushue in fourth, Gaguri in fifth, with Carpe and Poco taking that 6th and 7th slot, respectively. So, Spider, I have to say, I'm not too surprised to see DeFran kind of holding down that top spot still. He seems to really not be making any sort of movement. And even despite whatever issues we kind of had at, kind of like the first launch of the jersey designs with the kind of black on black lettering and kind of the uproar that went behind that, the fact that DeFran is still on top, despite whatever the uproar was, to an extent was a surprise, but just due to his overall popularity, that definitely kind of outweighed the negatives.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who straight up said, I wouldn't buy that jersey. It's garbage. It's a waste of money. It's overpriced garbage. It's interesting to see that he is on top, but it's not surprising in the least. Like, in fact, none of the names on this list really surprised me outside of Gushue. Like, I know Gushue was popular, and I'm curious to see like how much of that is local people buying it or if there are people importing it from China, which I actually highly doubt, just due to the inflated shipping costs and China. I'll leave that sentence as it is. But he was kind of the sleeper pick in this. So I guess the only way I kind of rationalized it is he did gain a following at World Cup. And you have talked about him for 3 months straight, every show. So people must be listening, and it is finally hitting home. So if you keep talking about him, I think he could be a solid number 2 for jerseys sold by the end of this. But like I said, none of the names on this list, I was like, wow, that surprises me. Like, no, like Surefour's on there. Of course, Surefour's on there. He's like one of the top streamers still. And he's one of the most popular players. Jonak's on there. Of course, Jonak's on there because he's the one who made all supports believe that they're actually DPS. And I thank him every day because then people actually want to play support, even though they're just trying to kill people. But they're at least playing support. So yeah, Gushui was like the standout for me because like I knew he was popular, but I didn't realize he was quite this popular outside of like our Discord, where you're like Gushui is amazing. So, but I have yet to buy a jersey because I am kind of turned off by the quality, because the jersey I would have bought probably would have been de France. So that would say something.
Again, you know what the funny thing about the Goose one is, the picture that they had in that infographic was for the away jersey, and I don't know if that was by mistake or if people are actually buying the away one over the pink jersey. I thought that was kind of weird. I don't know, just
it was strange, but you could just kind of mark that up to maybe they thought that would make a better picture. I don't think that's indicative of that's the actual jersey that's sold, because I think this is just more the player. So I don't know. I think maybe they just thought that would flow better in the infographic. I don't know.
Yet they have the black on black lettering with the DeFran one because that's the only option.
Yeah, exactly. They changed it to white lettering now, so it's a little better, but it's still not player authentic. So I am waiting out for that.
All right, I do see we have a couple responses in chat. Isam says that, but Carpe's highly disappointed, like last year's Poco better. With DMC, and I'm holding off until Leave is old enough to join Overwatch League. I buy his jersey. Not a bad pick by any stretch of the imagination, and hopefully we'll be seeing Leave playing soon.
Yeah, for sure. He would be one that I would pick up for sure. Even Eileen's jersey I've thought about, because I've been a big fan of Eileen. But like I said, the quality holds me back, and they're so expensive. You kind of expect quality.
Right.
And a lot of the teams that I like outside of the Spark, I already have a jersey for, or even a shirt. Like when they did that big clearance last year, I bought a whole bunch of shirts. Like I have like a long sleeve Dragon shirt, I have a long sleeve Valiant shirt, and I made the joke on our Discord, like I was wearing the Valiant shirt on St. Patrick's Day, but then I changed to my Outlaw shirt because I was embarrassed to be seen in a Valiant shirt. So that should tell you what kind of season 2 we're in.
See, and the thing too is, like, when you're wearing a Valiant shirt, you know, St. Patrick's Day is all about luck, and they clearly don't have any. So it made more sense for you to just switch jerseys. Although, really, putting on an Outlaws shirt, who really play like a 1-6 team at times, honestly isn't too much of an improvement.
I mean, it's the Arhan Jake Lowell shirt, so yeah. I mean that sums up the Outlaws anyway. At least it's written on the shirt.
And that is the only piece of Outlaws gear I am ever going to adorn.
Yep, exactly.
Because it's the only one I own.
I mean, I have an Outlaws jersey too, but I rarely wear that because I got that in a size too small on accident.
Well, speaking of the Outlaws, the one name that I was surprised not to see in the top 7 was Muma. I was kind of expecting him to be on the lower end, but he's not even on the top 7, so go figure.
See, I would have picked Jake over Muma. For sure, because Jake is still, as much as they meme him, he's still very popular with the Western fangirls. So kind of like the Surefour syndrome at that point. So I would have expected Jake up there. I actually would have expected. There were a couple of Outlaws fan players that I could have seen up there, but the list is what it is. So I'm curious to see if they'll ever put out like these are the jerseys that aren't selling, or maybe we'll see which ones go on clearance first, and then we'll know which ones are. Yeah. Oh man, boy, I better sign up for all my Corey jerseys now.
Well, maybe they're going to mark down some of the ARC New York Excelsior jerseys after the new set dropped earlier this afternoon, because ARC is no longer a member of the New York Excelsior. So after Wizard and Giannis went to Washington Justice during the offseason, there was a lot of speculation on whether or not ARC was going to be joining them. And, you know, there's all the talk about budget cuts and, you know, Washington just not being able to afford more players, which is why they have, you know, kind of like that deep league team that we always joke about. Well, after a rough start to their season, Justice have acquired ARC from NYXL. Now, ARC is a main support player. But he has been seen dramatically less playtime this season as he was playing behind Animo. So Washington, they have been running Phosix on main support. They've been having Guido on the flex support. And the support line for Washington hasn't been the best. That being said, I will note really quick, Guido did have the best fantasy week this past week. Who would have thought? There is that. But that's really the only thing that has been going for Washington as of late, outside of them picking up their first win. But we'll get kind of more into that a little bit later, because that was a rough series, to say the least. But Spider, I want to get your opinion on this. So, Washington, all jokes aside, do you feel like this is a surefire sign that they're wanting to shift to a more Korean roster?
I don't know about that. They always had the tools to go with a full Korean roster, outside of maybe one DPS. But they could have stuck with a more Korean roster. I feel like Wizards the kind of coach that will find pieces that work in any nationality. Like, I don't think he's so hard up that he would just go with a Korean roster. I think it makes things a little easier with kind of what I pointed out. But I think this is more of a familiarity, like almost like this is a need he saw they needed addressed, and he saw a player that he's already worked with. He knows is capable, and he can fill that role, because when you look at Arc versus Phosix as a whole, you don't have much to go off of this season. Like, statistically, Phosix has played a lot more than Arc, but when you look at the playtime Arc has played, statistically they're about the same. But who's to say that really matters, because Arc's really only played like half an hour total game time. It's very minimal. But when you look at Phosix, just to the rest of the league, he's like bottom 5 in Lucio statistically. And that could be indicative of the rest of the team. That could be who they've played. There are a lot of varying factors, but what you can look at is he is near the bottom in most deaths per 10. He is near the bottom in, most first kills in a fight. He's near the bottom in kills. Like, he is almost at the bottom in kills per 10 minutes. Like, he is at a little over 1 kill per 10 minutes as Lucio. Now compare that to Kuki, who is a tank player playing Lucio for the LA Valiant. He sits a little over 2. So that should just show you that Phosix isn't really doing what he needs to do on Lucio in this current meta. Now, obviously, like I said, tomorrow the meta is going to change. Things are going to be very different. Washington has a lot of time off to, kind of fix what they need to get Arc acquainted with the team. But I don't think this is indicative of them going to a Korean roster. I think this is more indicative of Wizard found a player that he knew was good, capable, had the ability to play most supports, and went with him. And Washington made him an offer. And that's not even talking about the intangible stuff. Like, Arc is known to be a great shot caller. Like, if you've done any research into Arc, you will find that Arc is a phenomenal shot caller, and he was one of New York's key shot callers last season. So bringing him in to the Justice, who clearly lack shot calling, if you've watched any of their games, is just a huge step up on its own. So I think this is just they needed some talent in support, and Arc was there to fill it, because obviously NYXL planned to move forward with Animo. They've played him the most. He's working well on the team. They haven't lost a match yet. So why fix what isn't broken? And why not make some money doing it? Because obviously, as much as we joke about Washington not having enough money to sign more players, obviously they found some more to sign Arc. So, we'll see how this goes. There's a little rumblings of Arc is a little confused by this trade, but that could just be Arc being, playing it up on Twitter, because it seems like he kind of knew about it, but maybe he wasn't fully told about it. But I think this is a good move for the Justice. And I don't think this will affect NYXL negatively in almost any aspect.
Yeah, and it's really important to note too that if you've ever tuned into any of Arc's streams, his English out of probably all the Korean players in the Overwatch League is top notch. So he is someone that can come in and kind of play that Bishu like role for the Washington Justice moving forward. So he can act as a translator, he can act as their shot caller, and moving forward, you could not only have a better Mercy player on your roster, but he is very comparable in the other heroes as well. Now it's just a question of, well, Fossix has played flex support in the past. Do they move him to flex support to kind of share time with Guido, or do they just run with Arc and Guido as a new support line? Only time is going to tell. But at the end of the day, Arc was a very integral part of NYXL in Season 1. Didn't really get to see that much playtime now, and for someone that doesn't die, even if he's playing or if he's on the bench, his stats aren't getting any lower, and he's too good of a player not to be playing in more situations. He's not a 30-minute a stage type of player by any stretch of the imagination.
No, not at all. I mean, this is the Arc the Undying. So if Washington can use anything above all else, it's someone who doesn't die.
Absolutely, because that kind of seems to be a problem with them, especially for Giannis. And maybe this is going to mean that Giannis just isn't going to be the first to die in most fights moving forward, now that he will have some additional support.
I did think it was funny if you watch, not watch, but if you read Benchmob's power rankings, he was like, Washington is an anagram for Giannis was hit, winces. Or something like that. It was pretty funny. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty good. And he replaced Florida with Waterloo University, because he's like, Waterloo University moves up into the 20th spot this week because they haven't lost to the Florida Mayhem. Or they did, whatever.
I like that move. I did see that. But anyways, let's go ahead and move into one of our newer segments that debuted this last week, as we talk a little bit more about player and team performances in Stock Up and Stock Down. All right, so Spider, you were not here when we introduced this, so why don't you go ahead and start us off? Whose stock is on the rise and whose is on the decline?
All right, so Stock Up, I gotta go with the Giga Chads, as Reddit has dubbed them, the Chengdu Hunters, specifically Jinmu and Ameng. I mean, the Hunters are clearly trending upwards, not just in our hearts, but in credibility. I mean, they went into the stage, we kind of wrote them off as like an unknown Chinese team. They didn't have a lot of high profile pieces to work with. They were very low on our power rankings, and boy, did they surprise us, because they came out as, I would arguably say, the most entertaining team to watch, because they didn't stick to 3-3. They always ran like their weird Hammond comps near the beginning of the stage. But then as the stage progressed, they started, putting in the 3-3 here and there. And they were actually very good at it. So it wasn't like they were a one-trick pony, like, we can't run 3-3, so we're going to do something different, which I actually think I said early on in one of our shows for the stage. Like, they haven't shown anything outside of this. Well, color me wrong. They proved me completely wrong. Like, they're a 3-4 team, but they could easily be, going into the next stage as a, 5-2 team, or, something along those lines, because they've shown that they have the flexibility. They have the talent. I mean, come on, Jinmu, no matter what he plays, is phenomenal. Like, we're gonna talk about his Pharah a little bit later, but like, when he brought out his Hanzo, like, there were so many moments that were clipped on Twitch for his Hanzo. Like, it was just disgusting. And if any of his other DPS is even close to that level, other teams have to be worried about it. And then Ameng, who we thought was like, oh, he's Hammond, he's good at the hamster, but how can he do in a Rhine versus Rhine battle? He, for all intents and purposes, went toe-to-toe with Bumper, and at times bodied Bumper. And, Bumper's the tactical feeder, but still, Ameng was able to throw down with him. And it just surprised me. So I think the Chengdu Hunters are on their way up. I think seeing them in a playoffs for stage 2 isn't unheard of, especially if we go to a DPS meta and Jinmu can flex his muscle, whereas Amen can stay on Hammond, because Hammond at this point has shown that he's not getting any weaker. He's only actually going to get stronger as the meta shifts. I think their stock is going up. Now, with that, with every up, there is always a down. There is always the pendulum swing forward and back, as Hexagrams likes to say when he's broadcasting Ghosts. The pendulum always swings forwards and backwards. The down is, well, it has to be the Florida Mayhem, right? I mean, they lost to the Washington Justice, and they didn't lose so much to the Washington Justice as they lost to themselves. Like, it was just a cut. Like, we talk about last season's game of Shanghai versus Florida as like a calamity of errors that eventually led to Florida winning just barely. Well, this time that calamity errors did not go in their favor, and they did win. So now they are like the gatekeeper of the bottom. So they pulled off one win against a hurting Philly without their shot caller, which can't go, too underrated, but as a whole, Philly is a phenomenal team, and I don't think that would happen with Boombox on the team. So you have to look at in a different world where Boombox wasn't sick. Florida is sitting down there with the Valiant at 0-7. So they are clearly trending downward. Florida has a lot of indicative problems. They don't have any standout players. See, unlike the Valiant, I feel like Valiant have talent on their team. Florida, I look at their team and I'm like, your team as a whole just doesn't, like, there's nothing outside a Saya player that says, boy, that guy could be on a top level team. And Saya player can only do so much in a DPS meta, much less a tank meta. So I feel like, Florida Mayhem's going to trend down until they get some kind of team built around Saya player. So I talked about bench mob, but in all practical purposes, welcome to number 20, Florida. The only way to go up from here is up. So, those are my ups and downs.
All right. Well, as for myself, if I'm talking about someone that's maybe on the up and up, that would be none other than Otto from the Washington Justice, who finally got his first win in the Overwatch League after, it was like 37 consecutive losses. So he's up in spirits. Washington is up in the fact that, they actually won a game. And, they have Arc. So Washington as a whole is slowly but surely, just maybe going to get there. But they still have a lot of ways to go. But that being said, we've seen them at their absolute worst. And with Arc going to be brought onto this team, they can only be looking better here in their near future. And I'm just looking forward to the meta shift so we can actually see Otto DPSing and not being stuck in Brigida jail, because nobody wants to see that. And we'll find out soon enough on what exactly the meta is going to be once that new patch drops. If we're talking about a team that is on the down, well, that's going to be whoever draws the NYXL in the round of 8 as the number 7 seed, whoever that may be, because, one, we don't know, which we'll talk about later on tonight in our playoff primer, but regardless of who this team is, you cannot be feeling good about drawing New York Excelsior as the 7th seed. That's a rough potential early exit, and no matter who it is, I'm looking forward to the match, but I do not like chances for either of these teams. But it's going to be a rough first round, to say the least. But moving on, Spider, let's go ahead and do a little debating about what is fact or fiction following Stage 1, week number 4. So let me get these popped up really quick, and we're going to talk about someone who you just had mentioned not that long ago. That being none other than Jinmu. And hopefully this is actually going to pull everything up. But anyways, so Jinmu has been absolutely popping off here lately in The craziness that is the Chengdu Hunters. Now, Fact or Fiction, Jinmu's Pharah has looked stronger due to the lack of DPS counters in the current meta.
I'm gonna go with fiction on this one because I feel like his Pharah has no counters in any meta, but really his Pharah is good overall. Teams have tried to counter him outside of this meta, like they've run McCree against him. We haven't really seen a lot of Widowmaker against it, which is arguably like Pharah's hard counter, but he has still since done work on Pharah, and I feel like he is a confident enough DPS player that you could say that he could run Pharah on the maps that Pharah works well on anyway. Now, you get into the whole like, well, can he run Pharah on any map? Can he run Pharah against any meta? You know, stuff like that. It's a very like deep question, but I'm taking this at like face value. No, I think his Pharah is good enough to run against other metas as long as they are not complete hard counters to Pharah. Like, I think he is a competent enough Pharah player that he will make it work in any sense that most other pros would deem Pharah acceptable. All right, is he going to be running Pharah on like Nepal Sanctum? Probably not, because when they did that, Defran just right clicked him as Zarya out of the sky. Like, clearly there are times that you probably should not run Pharah. But I think he is a confident Pharah player, and I think he will do well outside this meta, and I feel like he just makes the most of this meta as it is. Like I feel like this is complete fiction. Like he can do good in anywhere as Pharah that Pharah does well.
I'm gonna have to go with fact with this, primarily just due to the fact that one, we haven't seen the Widow counter. We've only seen McCree maybe twice against him, and outside of that, a lot of teams, even if they're running Zenyatta or Diva, they have not been trying to pressure him in the air. And more times than not, he's basically just had free will and bid ignored, which just makes him look better than he actually is. That's not to take anything away from the stats that he's put up or how good of a player he is, just because he was under the wings of one of the best Pharah players in the region that he was competing in at the contenders level. Mm-hmm. But it does kind of skewer the point of view that we have been seeing from him. He's going to see a little bit of fall off, but I still expect him to be a standout DPS player if we do see a meta shift. Next up, let's talk a little bit about the Dynasty. So, there's no secret where my allegiance lies, Spider.
Mm-mm.
So looking at Dynasty, it's a pretty big week, pretty big moment. So the Dynasty snapping their losing streak against the Spitfire was just as important as securing their first playoff spot. Fact or fiction?
I'll go with fact on this one. If not just for the Fisher storyline of he just keeps beating his old team no matter what team he plays with. But I mean, this went a long way to show that Seoul has adapted to being a more offensive team. They finally, covered up their weaknesses that London and, way back in the day, GC Busan used to abuse. And they've become a more whole team, and they made a playoff spot. Now, if you said, them beating the Spitfire was more important than a playoff spot, I'd disagree on that completely. But I think it's just as important to show that Seoul has grown. They did earn this playoff spot. Like I made the joke earlier that Al keeps giving them spots to earn, but no, they did fully earn this. Like, this is their spot. There was no question. Once they beat London, they were pretty much solidified in there. Like, some really crazy stuff had to happen for them not to make it at that point. So I think this was just important. Like, I think this is an important storyline for their mentality going into the playoffs, because they could potentially face NYXL and they can say, look, we've already beat one of the teams that always beat us. Why can't we just do that to NYXL? And that's, whether that's true or not, who knows? But it's good from a mentality point of view. So I'm going to go with fact on this one.
Yeah, I definitely go in fact on this one, because when you look back, even dating pre-Overwatch League, when these teams were known as Lunatic High and GC Busan, there was a point where GC Busan had taken 16 consecutive maps off of this Lunatic High core roster. Now, going into the Overwatch League, we had 2 straight sweeps, going 4-0 in favor of London. And then London took a couple more maps off of Dynasty before they were able to take a map off of them. And then, even despite that, out of the 4 times that they played, we had the 2 sweeps, and then Dynasty had lost to the Spitfire into 5-map series. So for them, this is an absolutely massive thing, because this is a team that for over 2 years had been just kicking you while you were down, and you just could not do the 900 IQ play or the 900 IQ strat that you needed to try to get even or just make the other team bleed. Mm-hmm. And for them, this has always kind of been the team that has been their Achilles heel. So this is absolutely massive. Now, what that's going to mean for the playoffs, though, we'll find out, because they might be facing York Excelsior. They might not be. But, in order to beat MXO, you first need to kind of get through London to begin with, just because, that is the other Korean powerhouse team. And these 2 teams have very different playstyles in some senses, but the aggression is there on both sides. And hopefully you can take something from this match in particular to build off of and use that as momentum in that round of 8. But moving on, let's talk about that game that was a little rough on the eye. So, fact or fiction, there were no winners in the Florida Mayhem versus Washington Justice match.
For the memes, I wanted to go with fact, but I have to go with fiction, because statistically, there was technically a winner, and that winner was Washington. It was an ugly match of division level, open division level play, but Washington did technically win, and it was their first win. So there was a winner. Now, there were a lot more losers in that match for sure. There was Florida, the team that Washington beat. There were the viewers like us who sat and watched that atrocity. And basically, it was like a train wreck in slow motion. Oh God, where did that alt go? And the Valiant, the Valiant were the big losers in this, because they're the only team to not get a win in stage 1. But I have to say, the biggest losers of this whole debacle is you and I right now, because we are still talking about this travesty. So just let it go.
See, I'm glad you said that, because at this point I have to say fact, because we keep having to talk about it. Honestly, though, for me, this series was the only time that I actually debated turning the Overwatch League stream off. It was that bad and that terrible of a performance on both sides of the field. That's just this does not feel like an Overwatch League game. I don't know what to say right now. So it was rough on us. It was rough on the teams. It was really rough on everyone. And regardless of what the win and loss column may say, I do not believe that there was an actual winner, especially not the LA Valiant, who went 0-7. So feels bad, man, if you're in that case. And last but not least, let's talk about another team that has fallen down quite a few pegs here in recent weeks, who should have been better, possibly, in this last meta, that being the Paris Eternal. So fact or fiction, Spider, Paris will actually look better in the next meta compared to 3-3.
I'm going with fiction on this one, because they pretty much built their whole team around a tank-based comp, and they couldn't get it done in that. But it all comes down to Ben Best. Ben Best is a great Rhine player. A lot of Paris's failings right now, you cannot pin on his Rhine play. His Rhine play has been solid. He's been up there. Paris's problems come from their off-tank play. They did not have a good Zarya player, whether it was Soon, Shadowburn, anything like that. But where I will circle this back around to Ben Best is when he has been forced off of that Reinhardt onto Winston. It hasn't happened often, but when it has happened, it has not looked good, and it has not worked well for Paris. So if they go into any meta where Rhine isn't the main tank, Paris is going to look a lot worse, because they haven't shown the capability to run anything besides 3-3. So I am very concerned about this. So moving forward, I am still worried about them, so I'm going to go with Fiction. I think they have some tools available, but they're going to need some help in the tank position moving out of a Rhine meta.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they have LH Flatty too, who is also more known for Reinhardt play as opposed to Winston. And I have to say, like, this one in particular has probably been the one I have felt most conflicted with. Because you have Paris, who probably should have looked better, but their lack of a Zarya presence really hurt them as a team. They didn't quite make the adjustments that I was hoping for, bringing in Nico to play in D.Va, he had been playing in Contenders Europe. We didn't get to see that. So it was just all down to Soon and Shadowburn, who neither of which really proved their prowess at that Zarya role. But I feel like even despite all of that, I feel like their DPS is going to look better just because, one, you're going to have Soon who, maybe is going to go back to Tracer. Maybe he'll be playing a Widowmaker. But you have a lot of untapped potential that we haven't seen from this team. We haven't got to see Nico on the Genji that much. We haven't even seen Danye unleash, who was really one of the standout players in Contenders. And I really feel like, despite all of the negatives that kind of surrounded this team in the past few weeks, this is a team that can easily trend above 500 moving forward. So I think there's still hope in Paris, but it's going to be murky waters ahead as they adjust to run in DPS after running 3-3 for quite some time. So it's going to be a bumpy ride, but I think they will get the job done. But I don't know, man. Some teams are definitely going to look better than others.
I mean, I think, like, you phrased it in that they're going to look better in the next meta. Okay, they may pass the eye test a little better, but when we saw them run 3-3, they looked really good at 3-3. Were they that good at 3-3? Maybe not, but they looked really good at 3-3. And that's kind of what I based it off of. They have DPS talent, but will they look better at it? I don't know. Like that's I hope so, because I had high hopes for this team, but I don't know if they will look any better. Maybe they'll do better, like, hopefully.
I agree. Well, who knows? Maybe they'll be semi-competent with Winston and they can just run dive. That might be the team's best shot, provided that, Ben Best just doesn't leap in and die immediately.
Oh.
Time will tell.
Standard Ben Best Winston play. Got it.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, moving on. Let's go ahead and jump into our deep dive for the week, which was between the Boston Uprising and the Dallas Fuel. And I know this is going to be a tough one for you, for sure. I know Dallas, all they had to do was win. They would have punched their ticket.
That's it. That's all we had to do.
Win and you're in, and you couldn't do that. And then you had to rely on help, and your help couldn't do that. And then Atlanta screwed you over, and then that knocked out both Texas teams. So now at least... Okay, I have to ask you this before we actually get into this. How upset were you that one of the other teams that you cheer for was the undoing of your other team?
Like, I mean, we've already talked about this at length, but it was rough. Like, I wanted Atlanta to win their games, but when Dallas pooped the bed at this point, I will clean it up for Twitch. Dallas pooped the bed. I was put in an awkward position that when Atlanta played, I wanted Atlanta to win, but I wanted Atlanta to lose so Dallas would make it in the playoffs. But I wanted Atlanta to do well because I had a lot of their players playing for fantasy this week. So that I was in this weird conundrum. But at the end of the day, when all was said and done, and Atlanta won, I had to come face to face with the reality that, hey, at least Atlanta won, and they are in it. It could have been much worse, and it could have been Atlanta lost. We would have had to play a tiebreaker with Houston, and then had Houston won, I would have been in a much worse predicament because we just lost to Houston. So at the end of the day, I guess this is the way it was supposed to work out. And I I am happy to see Atlanta going. Like I think they are a team that deserves to be there. They had some pitfalls, but they deserve to be there. And Dallas, I hate to say it, really didn't. Like Dallas has had some serious problems, specifically the two 4-0s that they got against them early in the season, and their lack of adaptability. Which, if you want, I'll jump right into the analysis. But that was their undoing. Like Dallas leaned into the Sombra Goat style where they dropped the diva. It worked really well the first two maps, and then it didn't. Like it just did not work after that, and they did not show any competency outside of that Sombra Goats. Now, I don't want to say the last three maps were not close, because the only map that really wasn't close was Dorado, and that wasn't off of a compositional problem. That was off of alt management, which I will give Dallas credit for. Their alt management throughout the rest of the series was phenomenal, to the point where when they were playing on Ilios, they were winning pushes with one alt apiece while keeping Boston at bay. So it was, I would honestly say, uncharacteristic of season 2 Fuel to make those kind of mistakes like they did on Dorado. Like, I think that was them in their own heads, which is going to happen to any team. And you can make like the dumpster fire memes and all that, but that can happen to a lot of teams at this point, especially when you're playing a team as aggressive as Boston with fusions up front. But circling back around, like RCK was on Sombra most of the night, and he did well enough in pretty much all of the maps to justify that pick, because you have to be getting value out of EMP, you have to be getting value out of Sombra to lose the diva, because that is a big trade. That is not like an Ana to Zenyatta trade where you base it off of enemy team comp. That is a compositional fact that you have to decide before the match that says, I will be able to get enough value out of this to make it worth it. And he did most of the time. The problem was, after map 2, Aim God just woke up. Like, Aim God was winning one-on-ones. Blase was able to turn around and at least help keep Aim God alive long enough to win those, actual Zenyatta battles against Sombra, and either force RCK out or outright kill him. So, just to give you some statistics on this, and this is really what paints the picture. In maps 1 and 2, RCK had 6 deaths total between maps 1 and 2, as Sombra, because he had diva moments here and there, but primarily on Sombra, he had 6 deaths total. Map 3 through 5, he had 24 deaths. Think about that. So that is a huge upswing, and a lot of it came, like I mentioned, Blase kind of helped Aim God out at times, turning around, throwing the armor pack, stuff like that. But most of it was due to Aim God's positioning. He wasn't getting hacked as often. He wasn't getting hit his EMP as often. And he just did better. Like, he was just playing more defensive. He was able to do it. And he finished the match with 121 eliminations, whereas Unko finished the map with 101. And that's a huge difference for Zenyatta when you look at basically a 20 elimination difference. And it's even crazier to actually look like the map by map statistics. Like Unko's eliminations, 56% of them came in the first 2 maps. So basically his were about even. Like you're basically supposed to be, about 50% for the first 2 maps and 50% for the last 2 or 3, depending. That he was right on par. Whereas Aim God's 77% of Aim God's eliminations came in the last 3 maps. Like, that is huge. Like, Aim God, I don't know what they said to him in halftime. They were like, "Look, just click on the Sombra's head, and you'll be fine." Like, it is insane. So a lot of this win falls back on Aim God, because if you watch the rest of the maps, like in the rest of the players, nothing really changed outside of Aim God keeping RCK in his place. Like, as a Dallas fan, one of my hotly debated topics is OGE. Like, OGE is hyper aggressive. He can get caught out. A lot of Dallas's 4-0s came from him basically being too aggressive, being out of position, basically feeding without the tactical part, like just feeding. and he had no part of that in this loss. Like, he played where he needed to be. He landed key shatters. He had some whiff shatters, but that happens to every tank in this meta. And he, as a whole, racked up 12 less deaths than fusions through the whole map. So OGE has fixed, at least in this match, his problem. So he wasn't the cause of it. I looked statistically at the rest of everybody. Everybody else was within like 2,000 of everything, like healing, damage, the key stats that we look at. So when I look at this map just came down to Dallas as a whole wasn't flexible enough to say, hey, that Sombra is getting shit on by Aim God, so we need to do something else. And then when they did that something else, it was either too late or it just wasn't effective. So what does this mean as a whole? I think Fusions leads a good Boston team, but I don't think they are anything better than the Fuel. I think this was a team of two mid-table teams duking it out for rights at bottom seed. Like, that's exactly what this match looked like. They both had problems. They both had issues that they needed addressing. I feel like, in the end of the day, either one of these teams could have been eighth seed, and it doesn't matter because either one of these teams, I don't think, is capable of beating Vancouver, because Vancouver at this point has shown that they have weaknesses, but neither one of these two teams have the capability to exploit those weaknesses, which is DPS comps, by the way. So I think this went the same way. And, when I look at Boston, because I have to focus on Boston now, unfortunately, because they are the team in the playoffs, they don't have the versatility. And they are a mid-table team right now. Like, I feel like they can grow to be a better team, just like I feel Dallas can grow to be a better team. But they're not going to be able to pull these reverse sweeps off of, like, what I would consider more battle hardened, like more level headed teams like NYXL or the Titans, teams that have been in these long series and have come out on top. So I think this match was exactly as we played it. And we watched it play. It's two mid-table teams fighting for the end, and I can't say one team played worse than the other. Like, last season, it was very easy to say, oh boy, the Fuel suck. Like, this team, sure, we got reverse swept. It sucks. Like, as a fan, it was hard to watch because each time, each map, each point, you're like, oh god, this is one more point towards that reverse sweep, and then it happened at the end. You're like, oh man, that sucks. But when I rewatched it the second, and I even watched some maps the third time, I came away like actually feeling pretty good about it as a Dallas Fuel fan. I was like, look, we didn't have the versatility that we needed, but it's something that we can fix. It wasn't like a calamity of errors. This was a good match through to two what I would consider middle table, maybe upper middle table teams. And both teams should be proud about how they played.
Yeah, I do want to note early on in the series when Dallas had taken a 2-0 lead, it seemed like a lot of the Sombra play was around getting the hack onto Color Hex, so he wasn't able to get key bubbles on Fusions, because Fusions was getting a lot of pressure on him really early on, and a lot of that set up really easy 6v5 advantages for the Dallas Fuel. Now, you kind of fast forward, and I agree 100%. Aim God did kind of reach that 8th gear, so to speak, and Boston Uprising definitely spent more time actively trying to scout for the location of RCK Sombra, and it seemed like whenever he was trying to wrap around on Volskaya, especially, he was always getting caught out. He was getting bursted down, which would force a translocator, and that would basically cause Dallas Fuel to need to reset. And any time that you have downtime, especially when you were already at a disadvantage just due to how good Boston Uprising's attack was on not arguably, it is by far their best map, even dating back to the Anarcho season, where they only lost on it once. It was just it was not a good draw for Dallas in that particular map type, but it just seemed like there were just these moments where the ultimates just did not hit. You had AKM basically grabbing air at times, but I will say OGE across the board played very well. But at the end of the day, a lot of this boils down to Fusion's and his shot calling capabilities. Every time we got to see his player cam, he was always talking. And, they even noted that during, the commentators throughout that series as well. And for me, as someone that isn't a huge Dallas fan, I will say, like, this is a team who, after Stage 4, I was really curious to see how is this team going to transition into the new season, because I have nothing but faith in this coaching staff. And they definitely surpassed the expectations that I had. And, regardless of what their record is, it does feel bad that with a 4-3 record, they're the only 4-3 team not to make the playoffs, which sucks, but that's just the level of the parity that we have right now. So for me, it really just boils down to just the alt usage at the end of the day. Sometimes it works great. Sometimes they don't have to invest anything. And the EMP usage just allow them to invest one ultimate, and then they could just transition into the next fight where they would only have to win with one ultimate. And then when they weren't able to build that EMP with the Somber comps, with everything revolving around this one ability, it just makes it where you're not able to do anything else if you're not getting the usage out of that. So the lack of swapping at that point definitely hurts. And, it sucks if you're in Dallas's position, because then you had to go and hope that other things fell into place. You had to hope that Houston got a very specific, map score line, which didn't happen. And I don't know if it would have felt better or worse for Houston to be the team to get in and also be the undoing of Dallas's chances, so to speak. But it is what it is. But I do expect Dallas to be able to consistently continue with where they're going right now. 4-3 right now is still a playoff caliber record. It's just a matter of where can they build from here. And really, what sort of looks are we going to be seeing from this team? Because it hasn't really necessarily been a question of, okay, who's going to be playing this and that on tanks and support? It's always been about the DPS players. So I'm really curious to see what looks we're going to be getting out of them going into stage number 2.
Yeah, they have a lot of DPS talent that wasn't shown off in stage 1. And they even have RCK who's shown off DPS talent, which we didn't expect. So I like I said, I feel good going into stage 2 as Dallas. We have a longer period of time off. A, because we're not in the playoffs, but B, we also have a bye week the first week of stage 2. So we have a lot of time to make some moves, get integrated, whatever they feel like they need to do, Jane and Arrow, because like you said, if anything else on this team, you can look at the players and say, all right, we have some high level players, maybe not like the Jonax and stuff, but we definitely have some standout players. Like you have Unko, you have AKM, you have some pretty high notable players, but we have probably, you could argue, maybe the 2 most notable coaches in the league, maybe outside of Wizard and Krusty, but we have faith in the coaching staff. And, Dallas has shown that, I mean, even after that reverse sweep, like if this was Dallas last season, that reverse sweep, Twitter would have been on fire. Like people would have been sending out nasty tweets and stuff. And the first tweet to go out from the team, from any member of the team, was OG. And he was basically like, look, last season when I played and stuff like this happened, I was on Twitter and I was like hating life and stuff like that. He's like, this time it's like, yep, just GG's Boston. We know our errors. We're going to fix them. Good game. And that to me was hopeful. Like I'm like, all right, good. They have fixed the fundamental issues behind the scenes that they are ready to now start fixing the play issues, which they already are addressing. Like just look at OGE the first week versus OG this last week. His play style hasn't changed other than the fact that he knows when to be aggressive now. So I am hopeful as a Dallas fan. But I will absolutely be realistic. I do not think they could beat NYXL or the Titans right now. Next stage, it could be a very different story.
All right, well, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into our main discussion, which is all going to revolve around the playoffs. So, first off, let's address the elephant in the room. There's been a lot of questions about seeding, and we did get an update earlier today. So, if you look at the standings, you may have noticed that we have 2 ties to determine who is going to be the 3rd and 4th seed, as well as the 6th and 7th seed. So we have the Fusion and Defiant tied for that 3rd slot, and then the Shock and Dynasty tied for that 6th slot. So, well, what does this mean? Well, we did get an update earlier this evening, and we are going to have the Seoul Dynasty facing the San Francisco Shock in a non-broadcasted standard match tomorrow, to determine who is going to be the 6th seed and who is going to be the 7th seed. So whoever loses this is going to be going up against the number 2 seed, who is none other than the New York Excelsior. So tough draw, whoever gets that one. And then on the other one, this one is not going to be determined by a match. You're going to have Toronto Defiant and Philadelphia Fusion settling who is 3rd and 4th seed via a mutually agreed upon coin flip. All right, so here's the thing. We were in the dark. We didn't know what the hell was going on. And we're like, hey, we got to do a podcast tonight. Hopefully we have information. Thankfully we got that. But before that, we were all kind of freaking out. We were looking at the rule book. And, a lot of the rule book states, stuff about head-to-head being the tiebreaker. Well, in this current setup and format of the league, you're really only facing a team once or twice throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
There might be a couple of instances where maybe you might play someone 3 times, but we don't have any head-to-head statistics to actually pull from. And when you have map differentials being the tiebreaker, that doesn't help either, because they finish with the same map differential. And then it's just like, well, I guess we're playing a match. But then we have I guess teams have the option to do just a coin flip or actually playing a match. So I just want to get your thoughts on how the league handled it, and then what the resolve of that was. Like, are you happy with it kind of being 2 different things, or would you rather see both of them being a coin flip or both of them being an actual game to determine those seeds?
In a perfect world, we wouldn't have this conversation because it would already be taken care of. Not even in a perfect world, in a sane world, we wouldn't have to talk about this. Like, this is clearly a huge oversight that anybody who has seen any level of league-based sports could have seen coming. Like, when you base it off of head-to-head and map differential, okay, cool. That works for a season format, but it's not going to work for a stage format because teams don't play every stage anymore. So they should have just built it into the rule book. Like, look, if teams at the end of these qualifications don't, are still tied, just flip a coin. Like, that's it. Like, it's that easy. That's how seeding's determined. If you have a problem with that, you should have played better in the first place. So that's essentially what it comes down to. And this is inexcusable as a league level. Like, sure, season 1, there were growing pains. It's going to happen. New league, new systems, new everything. Season 2, okay, we're going to expand the playoff structure. Okay, cool. You think you maybe should have ran this by some people first? Like, and the fact that the rule book has not been published, in all intents and purposes, it has not been published. Some people have access to it, stuff like that. So I'm not even going to broach that subject. But the rulebook has not been officially published. There was like a summary on the page, but the wording in the summary was different than what's actually in the book. So people inside the league were confused. Like, this is just dumb. Like, there are so many better ways that they could have handled this. And the fact that they waited until today to announce it was even worse. Like, honestly, last night, Nate Nanzer should have been on Watch Point and been like, here it is. Here's what's going to happen. We saw this coming, 2 weeks ago, earlier this week. We've already decided that teams will either play for their spots tomorrow in an unbroadcast thing and just be done with it, or teams are going to flip for it because they have to not live broadcast it because it gives the teams that are playing for a tiebreak a huge disadvantage, especially in this meta. It's just this whole situation has I don't want to say it ruined my day, but it definitely put a damper on an already not great Monday. So I think this is definitely a huge coming of age moment for the league, and hopefully they will fix this by next stage where they will just flat out say honestly, I think a coin flip is probably the best way to do it. Like I said, if you didn't like the coin flip, should have played better in the first place and not put yourself in a tied situation. Unless you're tied for 1 and 2, then you can be mad that it comes down to a coin flip.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And the thing that gets me too is it's as a Dynasty fan, I was I was petrified. I was like, oh crap, we might draw New York Excelsior in the round of 8. I do not want that to happen. And then, we see the Shock and the Dynasty wanted to play a match that isn't going to be broadcasted, which some people are having an issue with. And for me, it not being broadcasted isn't a huge deal. Primarily,
they said it wasn't going to be live broadcasted.
True.
So we may get a VOD of that after the playoffs, which I think, making the best of a bad situation is okay.
Yeah, it's pretty much. There are 2 ways to look at this. One, this is going to be a game of trying to throw less, so you don't face New York. And 2, a game of you not wanting to reveal and tip your hand too much, knowing that you're going to have to play additional matches in the stage playoffs. So I don't know which way this is going to go, but at least now we have a better indicator of potentially what matches we are going to see. But it's one of those things that it could have been handled a lot better. They threw up the schedule during Watch Point, which was basically empty because we had the times and then basically nothing else. We didn't see who was facing who or anything like that. We just knew hey, this is going to be on ESPN, this is going to be on ABC. And then that was it. That was all the information we had, and that we were just in the dark for, 18 hours or however long it was at that point. And it's just really, guys, come on. But anyways, what does this all mean? Well, what are the known matches? And to that, I will say we have one known match in the round of 8. That is the number 1 seed, the Vancouver Titans, going up against the 8th seed of the Boston Uprising. We have the 2 seed, New York Excelsior, who will be facing the loser of the San Francisco Shock and the Seoul Dynasty match that is taking place tomorrow. That is not televised or broadcasted. We will have the 3 seed going up against the 6 seed. So you'll have the winner of said Fusion and Dynasty match going up. Actually, no, I got that backwards. It's the Fusion and Defiant winner for the coin flip going up against the winner of the Shock and Dynasty match. And then you have the 4 seed, which is the loser of the coin flip, going up against... Actually, hold on. I think I mixed that up.
No, I think...
No, I didn't. Okay.
Yeah, no,
there's too many dashes in here, and it's confusing me.
It's the loser of the coin flip. Fusion or Defiant play against the Rain. So I think that's why they went with the coin flip, is they were like, whatever. If we lose the coin flip, whatever, we play the Rain. Oh, okay. So
it's just a battle of not wanting to face New York at the end of the day. That's basically what it comes down to. Now, just as a reminder, after the opening round, things are going to be reseeded. So we're not going to know who's going to be facing who in the round of 4 or anything like that. But it is important to note the semifinals, the finals, ABC, check it out. I know one of the days are on ESPN. I don't have the schedule up in front of me, so I can't tell you exactly which ones. But I want to get your thoughts on, one, the known match, So let's start by talking about the Vancouver Titans versus the Boston Uprising. So at the end of the day, this is a story of two very aggro Reinhardts and not much else. I mean, you look at the other components, and by and large, the Titans are the better team. And even looking back, we had a fact or fiction question about the Titans finishing a perfect stage. And sure enough, they got through their what we thought would be their tougher matches. They finished 7-0, much to some people's surprise. Do you feel like after this now we can finally kind of calm the nerves of some of the people that have been having this perception of the overhype behind the Titans? Or do you think that's going to continue until that inevitable match between New York and Vancouver?
I think most of that has been quieted at this point. I mean, they have proven themselves that they are a capable team. I mean, of the two teams, you could say that Vancouver probably had the harder schedule, and there's actually some math behind that works out to Vancouver did have a slightly harder schedule than New York. So I feel like they've proven themselves at this point that can they beat the NYXL? That's yet to be seen. Do they belong in the same conversation as the NYXL at this point? Yes, they absolutely do. And to this match, like there's not a whole lot of analysis that I need to do. Vancouver's going to beat Boston because Vancouver has shown that their only weakness is not 3-3. When you're forced into 3-3 against Vancouver, you're more likely to lose than win. So and Boston hasn't shown comps outside of 3-3 to any, severe degree. So I think like Boston's, they fought hard to get there, but they're going to take that walk home pretty early, just like I think Dallas would have. Like as a Dallas fan, I don't think Dallas would have fared any better than Boston. I think Dallas might have had a slight better chance to take a couple more maps off of Vancouver because they can, run a Sombra based comp, but we'll see. Like I don't have any hopes for Boston in this match.
I'm sure the Weekly Uprising is going to be severely disappointed in that answer. For me, you look at this team, and I've had a lot of gripes about Color Hex in the past with his Zarya play, which has been kind of mid-table. But MGOT has really kind of turned it up another notch. So he's definitely going to have to match Twilight for them to really be able to put up a solid front. But if we're looking at, what Titans struggled with, it definitely was Chuntu Hunters running those DPS-centric compositions, which is not something that we have seen from Boston. But would I be absolutely shocked if we got to see Blase bring out maybe a surprise Doomfist? Probably not, because, we've seen him pop off into PTR pugs. But that being said, Doomfist on this current patch does not have that same impact, so I do not expect to see that. So if Boston is going to come into this match saying, hey, we're just going to run 3-3 the entire time, they're not going to win that, because every team that has tried to run 3-3 that hasn't had that extra layer of depth to their lineup has been bested in every situation by the Vancouver Titans. And it's a tough draw, always as the A seed. And in more times than not, statistically, the A seed never comes out on top. And you could date that back to really any sport or esport out there. The cards are definitely stacked against them. But I would love to see a different look from Boston outside of the 3-3. Because really, at the end of the day, you might be able to have a better look or a better chance at beating Vancouver just because they have struggled with that. And they seem to unravel when things get a little bit chaotic. And I don't feel like the aggro Rhine, so to speak, is going to be enough to cause that chaos to be the Titans' undoing. So with that being said, Spider, outside of that, it's hard to kind of do analysis on matches that we still don't know are actually going to be the final matches. So
I tried, though.
You tried. So let's just do general playoff predictions. At the end of the day, who are you expecting to reach the finals? And who do you ultimately feel like is going to come out on top of stage one?
All right, so I'm going to go with the extreme comp out answer and say NYXL and Vancouver Titans because anything else would be disappointing. But when I actually look at the possibility of matches, depending on how things get reseeded and stuff, we may actually see NYXL versus the Titans earlier. Who knows how they end up doing it? Because at this point, the playoffs are a mystery to us, just like it is to them. It seems so. But I mean, when you look at the initial matches that we have a possibility of knowing, like I think the NYXL can beat the Shock or the Dynasty, regardless of who they play. Shock have some problems up front, which NYXL will exploit. Dynasty have some off tank problems that they're fixing. I don't want to downplay Michelle and Fisher's work together. Like they are definitely getting better, but right now I don't think it's at the level that they need to compete with the NYXL. But then it gets really interesting because you start looking at Fusion and Defiant Soul. If Fusion or Defiant play, I'm trying to parse my notes here. I don't think Soul can go toe to toe with Fusion or Defiant either right now. I think if they were to play Fusion, they have a shot. Like I definitely think they have a better shot to beat the Fusion than they do to Defiant because Defiant have just looked stronger week over week. Since the beginning. And the Defiant have had a extra week off. So the Defiant didn't play last week, whereas Philly and Seoul both played last week. So, there is that extra time off to prepare, regardless of, coin flip shenanigans and crap like that. On the flip side, I feel like if Atlanta plays Fusion, they have a better chance because I think Fusion is a good team and they deserve to be in the playoffs. But I feel like they're one of the weaker, higher seeded teams right now. They have shown that they lack some flexibility. We make jokes about their trash goats, but obviously it's not that trash because they made it in the playoffs securely, regardless of coin flip shenanigans again. But Defiant have just looked so much better once they got Neko, and Atlanta has beaten Defiant already, but that was before they had Neko. So it's almost like, do you really count that? So like you said, it gets really, really complicated when you start looking at the individual matches. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to one match, regardless of where it is in the bracket. It's NYXL versus Vancouver. Whether that's the finals, semifinals, who knows based on how they do seeding, how they work all this bull crap at this point. I don't really care. I want to see NYXL versus Vancouver, and whoever wins that is gonna win. Right now, I can't statistically tell you which. Like I've gone back and forth. Like I've talked to many people about this today, and they've all presented very good arguments about it. But I'm gonna go with Vancouver just because I'm gonna throw my lot in with Runaway again. So I think Vancouver will take it at the end of the day on pure fanboyism. Like it is too close to call. Like I would not be disappointed one way or another. Now, if a team other than NYXL in Vancouver takes it, I will be very surprised.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And for me, I'm going to go over the matches that I want to see. Obviously, we have Titans and Uprising. And from a match perspective, out of the things that I think would make for the best matches possible, I would like to see Philadelphia Fusion versus the Seoul Dynasty. Which would leave us with New York versus San Francisco, and then the Defiant to face the Rain. I think those would be the best possible matches that we could get from entertainment value, as well as just being the closest overall. And for me, obviously, we're going to be very selfish and say, hey, we don't want Titans and Excelsior to be on the same side of the bracket, regardless of if we're doing a reseed or not, which they are. But I don't think you want to give away what would technically be like the main event earlier than expected. That's what everyone is wanting to see, and any final outside of Titans and Excelsior is not going to be one that people are going to be as heavily invested in, just due to the fact that both of them did have a perfect stage. And, even going back, we haven't really seen that done outside of, Boston having the perfect dive stage, which was good for them, but then they kind of fell short in the playoffs. Hopefully, that is not a bad omen for either the Titans or the NYXL, but I don't think that is going to be the case, just due to the fact that, well, one, they both seem to be kind of like at another level compared to basically any team below the second seed at this point, even in this current meta, or with whatever wacky looks that we may get. So that being said, I'm gonna have to agree. Like, I expect Titans versus NYXL, and it's so hard to say. Like, we've been on the runaway fandom for a long time. We see this team grow over the course of Apex. Going into Overwatch contenders, we saw them win their first contenders in Korea after some of the better Korean teams did leave for the Overwatch League for the inaugural season. And then now we see Vancouver Titans have a similar trajectory to what London Spitfire and New York Excelsior had in the season 1. Now, if they're going to follow that, well, that has to mean the Titans are going to win, because that's what London did. I mean, just based on history. So, I don't know. Like, I really want the Titans to win. And if they face NYXL, it's a battle of who's better between Nene and Siemens Zoo. And if you're just looking at the statistics, if you're looking at everything, these teams are neck and neck. So at the end of the day, it probably is going to be a coin flip. But I feel like New York, in this meta, knowing that they are also able to run Meko on Sombra, is going to give them the advantage in that series. But in a best-of-7 series, with those two teams, I would expect it to go the distance. I don't think it's going to be a one-sided affair by any stretch of the imagination. And when you have the two best teams going at it like that, I fully expect them to bring out the best in one another, which is going to lead us to that 7 map. So hopefully we'll get the match that we want to see, and something that isn't going to be not as entertaining, because really at the end of the day, we want to see the best face the best, and that's basically all there is to it. But I feel New York Excelsior are going to come out on top when all is said and done.
Okay. I mean, you're entitled to that, but I will stick with Vancouver, because they are number 1 team in the league right now, statistically. And as the stats guy, I have to fall back on statistics when fanboyism doesn't win out, which you dirty traitor. Where's Slambo when I need him to break this tiebreaker?
He's too busy playing corporate volleyball.
It's a bold move, Cotton. See how it plays out. But either way, like, I think we can both agree that anyone outside of Vancouver and NYXL would be like a left field shot. Like, there is, you look at all these teams, and at the end of the day, it's, can they beat Vancouver or can they beat NYXL? No, most likely. So I am curious to see how it all plays out in the end. Coin flips, tie game shenanigans. Like, who knows? Like, I hope next playoff stage we have a much clearer picture to talk about going into it, because this really made analysis hard. Like, this week I was like, all right, cool. I have a certain workload on Monday, so I can pull stats for matches. Like, I can say, like, I can actually do deep dive into what we could expect out of matches, like comps and stuff like that. I can't tell you comps for matches if I don't know what the matches are. Like, there are various matches that we don't know what either team is, much less one team is. So I really wish I could have gave you guys more analysis on, like, comps and stuff, or just, player stats and stuff I like to do, but I couldn't, and that drove me nuts today. So I wrote like this page of notes, like possible scenarios and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, like, I was sitting there looking at it, I was like, none of this really matters, because I don't think any of these teams can beat NYXL or Vancouver. Like, had Guangzhou made it in, had Chengdu made it in, it could be a different story because they've already pushed Vancouver. And NYXL had like a sleeper schedule for most of it. Sure, they beat the Shock, but so did the Titans. Okay, so at the end of the day, who knows? Like, it sucked to be a podcaster right now. Like, it was hard today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I do quickly want to note on is the Philly factor. This is a team who statistically has been able to beat but also lose to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Playoff time, that's the ultimate X factor, really, because you have a team that has been known to go the distance, who really wears down their opponent. The problem is their go-to
they wear down themselves at the same time.
Yes. So, you could try to put any sort of value on that to what you will, but will it come into play? Well, the round of 8 is probably more likely. But I will say, like, when it comes to the playoffs, when it comes to facing the best teams in the league, you have a better shot at beating them earlier than you do later. Because chances are, early on, they're going to be probably not quite the form, not to be as battle tested, and you could throw something completely off kilter at them. And yes, it's a gamble, but high risk, high reward, and we've seen really weird things work. To some degree, I should say. It hasn't worked to actually win a series against either one of these teams, but you can always kind of throw them in a loop. So I don't know if we're going to see decent 3-3 out of Philly. I don't know if they're just going to be the battle-tested, like, grime and dirt Philly that we're so used to seeing time and time again in the playoffs. But I don't want to discredit what they have done in the playoffs. So if there's a team that could potentially be the dark horse, that is definitely the team to keep an eye on.
I will throw out this fun statistic, though. If Boston Uprising win their first map, they could possibly beat the Titans because Boston has shown that they only get better later in maps, and they don't statistically win the first map. Of their 7 games, they've only won the first map twice. And one of those was against Florida. So come on. But if Boston can somehow beat Vancouver at that first control map, it could be anyone's game. But I don't think that's going to happen.
All right. Well, with that being said, guys, we're definitely going to keep a close eye on whatever does happen tomorrow with that coin flip and with that unbroadcasted match between the Seoul Dynasty and the San Francisco Shock. Hopefully, Dynasty don't draw NYXL because I would hate to see that match in the round of 8. That would be rough, and probably an early exit for Dynasty. And really, at the end of the day, we don't want to see that. We want to see Dynasty at least try to make a run for it, and then not just take a Dallas approach and have an early exit.
Womp, womp, womp.
But with that being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and close out the show for tonight. So if you guys want to help us out, one of the best ways to do that is to go leave us a review over on iTunes. We're always looking for feedback on how to improve the show, make for a better listening experience for you. And I do know we have a new review, and this is from iTunes. It is a 5-star review from Danta232, who is one of our Aussie listeners, and he says, love the in-depth analysis and chat about Overwatch League. It's an area that is definitely lacking command compared to regular sport. Perhaps it would be interesting to include Fact or Fiction from Patreon subscribers on Discord for more interactivity. And yeah, that's always something that we're looking to do, is to kind of bring in viewers a bit more. So we're always up for people submitting Fact or Fiction or segment ideas, things like that. So whether it's on Patreon, whether it's on Discord, things like that, we are always open ears, and we appreciate the feedback nonetheless. If you're looking for additional content to consume, we do have Overwatch Recall, which is our hub for all things Overwatch, Overwatch League, Path to Pro, Fantasy Overwatch League, all that good stuff that is on our website. And then we have episodic listings released every Sunday night. So if you want to find the latest listings, either go to owlnshow.com/OWRecall or follow Recall on Twitter at OWRecall. And last but not least, we also have our Patreon. So if you would like to show additional support to our network of Overwatch shows, consider pledging to our Patreon. We have tiers starting at just $1 a month. You can find more information at patreon.com/OWL network. And special shout out to Blaze and Bob on becoming our newest patron supporter. Bob actually did something. So that is, something that is new and exciting. So you too can join the likes of Blaze and Bob, Brendan, and Gabby in helping out our network and helping it continue to grow. As you mentioned earlier, we did expand. We do have a new Contenders podcast on our network that has been added to our provider page on iTunes. So guys, if you search Overwatch League Network on iTunes and you click on the artist name, it will actually display all of our 5 podcasts, and then you can kind of switch between the feeds there. Maybe one day iTunes will actually post it all on one feed, but you could go to whichever podcast you're needing, or, you could just subscribe to all of them. That also works too. But Spider, we have a number of ways how our listeners can get a hold of us. So why don't you let them know how they can do that?
Well, first I'm going to give a shout out to Ice Ham Jello, who donated 108 bits in our live chat. And then we also had an anonymous cheer donate 20 bits. So thank you guys for the bits donation. But if you'd like to talk to us, interact with us, so we have various ways to get a hold of us. You could do so at email, contact@owlnshow.com. The website is www.owlnshow.com. Twitter is @owlnshow. YouTube is youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. Discord is discord.me/OWLN Show. If you're listening to the audio feed, we do have a Twitch feed that we are on many nights a week. It's twitch.tv/OWLN Show. We are a Twitch affiliate, so if you want to show some additional support, you can do so by subscribing. You get a cool little emoticon. And like I said, we are on here almost every night a week. The show you're listening to now is Overwatch League Network. It airs Mondays at 7 p.m. PT. You have Overwatch League by the Numbers, which is our fantasy Overwatch show. It is Tuesdays at 6 p.m. PT. And if you're not into fantasy but want to be, listen to that show because I'm not very good at it, but they give really good tips. So I'm now in 3rd place in our league, which is better than last. We have our variety Overwatch show, which is Heroes Never Die. They just celebrated a big milestone of 150 episodes. So moving forward, you can expect more shenanigans from them. It's Wednesdays at 5 p.m. PT. That's Totem and Ednar with that amount of fun stuff. I don't want to say shenanigans again. I feel like I've said that all show. And then we also do host streams. So we do host streams Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, basically whenever we're available. I wasn't able to do one last week because I had something come up. And then Saturday night, I was in no condition to do a stream after watching that Dallas game, with the following day also doing that, if you know what I mean. So, yeah. Lots of stuff to check out. So definitely check out our twitch.tv/OWLN page. Finally, like Totem said, we have our Patreon. I'm not going to go over all that, but again, it's patreon.com/OWL network, various tiers. So definitely check that out. If you want to talk to me directly, you can join our Discord. I'm always on there, but you can also find myself on Twitter @SpiderGD. Slambo, who is not here, he's too busy playing volleyball like a true nerd. Because who else would play volleyball? Is @SlamOverwatch. How about you, Totem? Why don't you bring us home?
Well, you can find me over on Twitter @TotallyDrunkCTR, and I really do hope in Slambo's case, everyone is just in suits playing volleyball, because at a corporate event, I would just find more entertainment and laugh value out of that. But with that being said, guys, thank you so much again for hanging out with us tonight on Twitch for our live show for Overwatch League Network. Again, this has been episode number 72. I've been your host, Totally Drunk, joined as always by Spider, and we hope to see you back tomorrow night for our Fantasy Overwatch League podcast, OWL by the Numbers. And if not, then guys, we'll see you back next week. Have a good night.